But like the problem is like every time I'm like, ooh, he's getting everything. I'm like, I don't have the energy to do that. So that's
I'd
gonna
like to
be a
get more, man,
problem.
but my Wi-Fi is so bad.
I feel that. I feel that. I feel that. But yeah, so let's get into this and kind of go through. So, guys, welcome to the program again. Appreciate you coming to. We have a special guest today. We have Lane Dating from the On the Rise YouTube channel, all things Canadian soccer. It's great. We enjoy having him here. We enjoy having the conversations. We wanted to originally talk about Canadian men's national team players getting moves abroad, how that movement kind of went through. Also, we just went through a very, I'd say, dare I say, successful friendly window. Are we allowed to be that confident?
I like to think so.
I, I think we can bask in that good work. So I think we'll call it that, some good work from there. But first of all, Lane, thank you for being with us. Tell a little bit about yourself, the channel that you run, kind of a bit of the history, because I've been watching you from a distance, and I'm thinking like I got to get you on at some point and talk some things here. But you let me know.
Oh, really appreciate it. It's great to be on the podcast. It's so much fun to be here. Much appreciation that you've been watching the channel. That's all I really wanted to start with the channel. Thought Canada soccer was just slow. We weren't really a soccer country, and I'm like, great opportunity to start making content around the sport I love with, and start building a community because there's only so many really Canada content creators really out there. Yourself, a few others, and I wanted to jump into the market and just start making a fun community to start breaking out transfers and all those reactions. I'm a huge United supporter, love United stand, and I'm like, I want to make content like this, but a little bit more not as intense as Goldbridge, but still fun for Canadian supporters and build a great community. So that's kind of where it all started from. And I have a background in kind of diploma in media and broadcasting. So I'm like, let's put this to use. Let's build it around Canada soccer, right? So that's how it all kind of started off.
No, and that's good. Like I've watched all the info on transfers and what's they're happening, and I love it. I've loved the content. I love the frequency. I was telling you before we went live here because we're live. I guess we're
Yeah,
live on YouTube
let's
now. This
go.
was not the plan, but we're here, so we're gonna make the best of this. I just realized this. This was not a recording. This is, as I've said, this is my ADHD is real. So yeah, so it's good. I've loved watching that, and I think we'll start off with the friendlies because the friendlies literally just happened. I've seen a few content creators. I know Deadball, JJD had this conversation. I am not comfortable with the idea of us being the kings of CONCACAF of anything until we win a trophy, just to kind of cement the legacy of the growth of it. But you cannot deny that it's been a good rise for the program since, I would even go as far as saying 2021. The Haiti loss for the men at the Gold Cup, but since then, World Cup qualifiers, a Nations League finals, Gold Cup semis, and then Gold Cup quarterfinals, and then where they are now. Are we comfortable with calling Canada the third best team in CONCACAF, or do you feel that they are a little bit higher based off the form of the traditional top two?
I think we definitely should be third. I mean, I think we're past Jamaica. I think it's close, but I think with our form, with how good our club is, our general, how we've transitioned with Kevin Blue now taking over, Jesse Marsh coming in, we just look all around more stable, right? And I think when you look at the clubs our players are now playing for, how good tactically we are on the field, it's not just sit back, soak up pressure, and maybe beat these big teams. Now you look at these friendlies, it's we should have beat Mexico. It's not just hoping for a result, right? It's we should be winning. We're out there beating the US. I don't want to call us the kings of CONCACAF. That's far, like you said, I agree with you completely. Still we win a trophy. It's still we win a Nations League or a Gold Cup or whatever it may be. But I think I can solidly call us number 3, and we should be competing with number 1, that area.
No, I think I do side with you in that conversation as well. I feel like we are comfortably. I said after World Cup qualifiers, I think they're uncomfortably sitting in the third place seat, and now they have to consistently show they belong there. And you can argue the consistency, but ultimately, I think the thing that they've lacked is the trophy, right? Whether it's Nations League, whether it's the Gold Cup, something that says, hey, they are a force to be reckoned with. I think they are closer to more solidly into currently the third best team in the region. Like, I do tend to agree with you here. I think the gap between them and the top two is a lot smaller than it's ever been more recently. I like you mentioned at Jamaica. I don't know if I trust a Jamaica from window to window, let alone just coach or cycle to cycle. Their consistency is, I mean, it's a transfer window for them all the time. It's new
ridiculous.
players in, new players out. There's no consistency, and that's the thing we always talk about with them. But I feel as if for Canada, what they've been able to do is they've consistently shown so far that they belong in that conversation. I think a trophy solidifies it for them. And I mean, we look at the results in their last two friendlies, right? I know the Mexico friendly was, I echo everyone. I don't know what you can take from that game because the whistle just blew again. And then like the flow, and then the whistle just blew again. Like the whistle was going. It felt like I was talking to someone on X. It felt like a traditional CONCACAF game. We haven't had one of those in so long.
It's been a long time.
Just choppy, broken up. But there were still moments of that. When you look at, say, that Mexico game specifically, right? There are players who I think had moments and they stood out. But is there anything that stood out to you for that game in terms of players who were able to maybe showcase themselves that maybe we knew about, or more reminding us that they were always up to that quality and playing well?
I think there's really two clear standouts from that game, and one massively for me was Dane St. Clair. I think now when you look at our two goalkeepers, it's just clear ahead how good St. Clair and Crépeau really are compared to that third spot. Like, there's no really competition for number two now. Like, St. Clair, he's been in the mix. He's had a few starts here and there, but just coming up big to make those one or two stops when it's not really an action-packed game, I think that was really important to see what he has. And he's able to show up in those big moments. That was really key. And especially the fact, I thought the biggest thing for me was Alphonso Davies, and not just the fact that how good he played, but it was when he made that block, and I think it was the 88th, 89th minute.
Yeah.
It wasn't just how quiet he is, because we could see that before when we had leaders on the team. Now he got that armband, made that block. He wasn't just quiet. He grabbed Bombito, he yelled at him, he looked at St. Clair, he just got everyone hyped up, right? And so many people, I don't know about yourself, but for me, it was kind of like, yes, the result matters, but it's more so the performance. And Davies kind of showed that these results really matter to them and not just the performance. So I thought that was a really key thing to take.
No, that's a fair point. I remember when the discussion over who was going to get the captaincy was going on, right? It was him or Steph Eustáquio. And like, Steph is in every, like, I think the nature of his position, he's in every schmozzle that's going on, right? He's always talking to the ref. That is him, right? That's his personality. There are things there, and I feel like him being one of the vice captains works. But the social experiment of, hey, if you give your best player the captaincy, does that make him a better leader? Or is that just because you're the best player, you get the armband? I think I could have understood the arguments both ways with giving it to one or the other, but you've clearly see him buy into the role. I think the responsibility, especially with him playing as a left back now, the responsibility of him with that armband, you see, I'd say he's maturing more as a player. He doesn't have to be the player who's given the green light, and maybe he is, but he chooses his spots more. But he's not the player that we saw who was young, where we said, hey, give him the ball, let him create something, and then people will say, is he playing hero ball too much, or is he just a player who is trying to create something? He's a player who's like, this is my role, I'm going to play it, I'm going to settle things down. It starts from the back line, so it starts with me. We build out, and then we let the talented players go do it. I think it's worked out well for him. And I think the role has done well to make him see his role a little bit more defined. I think it's done wonders for him at the national team level. We'll see how that translates to club. At club, I think he's more free to kind of be that Rome player because there's so much quality at Bayern. It doesn't really hinder him to be that left back. But for Canada, I think it's done wonders for him. I like those two shouts. I do think Ali Ahmed in the Mexico game, though, when he wasn't being clipped, he was honestly reminding, like, he's a player which also is the same age as Alphonso Davies. Fun fact.
That's ridiculous.
Which it's funny how the depth of the program, we'll talk about that a little bit later, but he's a player who we've been waiting for. And it feels as if a lot of the players, it's just when they get their shot, they'll shine through. And within this marsh ball system, they're really playing well. Ali, to me, was that player. Schwanier, I think, solidified himself into this role where I think if Laren didn't have that big chance and continue to struggle, I think Laren's looked good this window, but just hasn't. He's been snake bitten. Like I feel for the player. I know, like it feels like on Twitter we're always calling for him to get out of the lineup. I am one of them. Don't worry. I'm that. But his movements were good. He's just been snake bitten. And I think maybe give him a window, give him a game off, give him a start off, or just keep going back to the well and think eventually it'll turn up. But to me, like Dane St. Clair and Ali Ahmed were my players who I think they stood out in terms of what they did in that Mexico game. You can't really take much because of the flow of it, but ultimately I think he did a very good job. Those two for me did a very good job of cementing and reminding us, hey, there's an order of things. There is depth here, and it kind of works its way out there. So it is good in that sense, and we love to see how it goes there. So I love that for those two players. Now they get the draw against Mexico. They get the win against the US, which was comfortable. That game was far more comfortable than I thought it would be. And now that maybe that's more of an observation and more of a conversation with the US program than it is with us, because we look like we were up for that game. They look like they were in a game, for lack of better words. But the same question that we had for the Mexico game back to this US game, any standouts in that game for you that you felt really did well to earn their spots in this roster moving forward?
Well, would have said Ali Ahmed, but you clearly pointed that one out. That he was phenomenal against the US. What he did down that right end flank against the United States was great. Just his dribbling, his connection with AJ was sensational. But for me, it was Bombito. I mean, that's just an obvious shout. He's already just become the best center back in CONCACAF, which is crazy to think of, which I think he is. I think he's past Chris Richards already. I think when you see Chris Richards out of that Crystal Palace setup, it's different, but that's the US talk. But Bombito, when you look at him, he's just a pure athlete, right? Like the way he's gone through his programs and gone through college, NCAA, he's just an athlete. He doesn't look like a defender. He has the build, he has the pace. And now he's able to read the game. And the way he read the game, a couple of those plays was just great. You could see his pace. You could see his build, especially when he had, I think it was Pulisic in the corner. He got back, tracked the ball, and then bodied Pulisic off the ball, left the ball there, and just jockeyed him around a circle for like 5 seconds until he passed the ball off to Johnston. Like he was, it's crazy to see how far he's come. I know that's just an obvious show of how good Bombito is. But Bombito and Ahmed were just such standouts in that game, in my opinion.
I agree with you there. I think Bombito is a player who has all the athletic traits, but once he gets to reading the game a little bit better, I think the sky's the limit for him. I think he's entered the conversation in terms of the best center back. To me, again, any conversation of the best of something is consistency. So I won't put Moyes in there yet. But hey, he's entered the chat, and he's certainly saying, hey guys, I'm not just a fast center back. Like, I'm learning this. And I think a couple years, if he continues to brace how he is, 2 years in Liga, he's playing against that type of competition, he will be good. He'll have the pace, plus he'll be able to read the game a lot better. That opens the door for so much, because now, instead of just having Davies in you can just eliminate any counter off of a set piece role. You have him, you have Bombito, you have Cornelius to a degree, you have AJ who can fly in for headers. For
Richie.
It opens the door so much for what they're trying to do. And I love it. So I like those two shots for that. AJ in the game, always forgotten, but steady. That man is steady and finally playing as a right back, not a right-sided center back. That frightened me. Honestly, it frightened me every time we saw that, especially like the first Uruguay friendly leading up to the World Cup, when we saw Darwin Núñez to say him. Oh, I can outjump him. We'll do that. So him in a right back position, I think, suits him so much better. And I've loved the progression of him comfortably at Celtic going. He had a solid, comfortable game. But then again, Xuan Yao. In the midfield, you have no Kone. He steps in and he's playing well. He allows you to release and push Estacio further up the pitch, and kind of love what you see there. Schaffelberg is Schaffelberg. He is I always wonder with someone like Schaffelberg, because he is just the most direct of their outside wing players, right? He plays like a younger Davies would play. He plays how Tejan played when he was first breaking the team, where it was just give me the ball, direct runs. I'm going to outrun you. I'll cut it in cross or put it in. And he's playing with more of that fire than the others, which isn't a bad thing. But sometimes you just need that directness versus just, okay, we've learned more. We are reading the game better. And there's nothing wrong with reading it. But Schavelberg sometimes, and especially in the system, where you give him the ball and you need that level of just directness and ambition, right? You need someone to just be ambitious enough to attack the space and kind of go from there. And I've loved what I've seen from him. He's working well. I love what it is. Ooh, questions, because again, I thought we were recording. This is a live, so
it's all good, man. This is great.
Chaos. Sam Bone from Jamaica. Always good to see you, man. Bless up, big man. Do you think Canada has arrived as a world-class team? I don't know if we're world-class. What do you define as world-class? That's my always first question. What is your definition of it? But I do think, like we said earlier, I think the gap between us and the top two teams in CONCACAF is a lot smaller than the gap between us and the next teams in CONCACAF. We'll find out next window when they play Panama. There's no doubt. But because I think Panama on paper is a worse team, but stylistically, I think they'll be more of what we expected from the Mexico game, not the Mexico game that we got. Right? Because even if we look back, the game that we won in World Cup qualifiers 4-1, that game was a slog for the first 50 or so minutes, and Alfonso Davies goes on a run. Game. Yeah, it was a 1-1 game. It was going to be a draw. They had taken the air out of that game, and they were just like, we're cool passing the ball. And then Davies comes out of nowhere, and then the dam erupts, and then it's 3 goals, and then it's 4-1. So I think Panama will be more of the game that we thought Mexico will be. But I think the gap between us and Panama is greater than the gap between us and Mexico and the U.S. And that's more so based off of their state. But I wouldn't say that we are world-class anywhere at this point.
I think that's a stretch.
It is a stretch, right? Yeah. We had a draw against France and then a good half against the Netherlands. To me, again, I'm consistency. So if we're a world-class team, we have to be beating world-class teams consistently for us to say that's what we are.
I don't think there's a world-class team in CONCACAF, let alone Canada.
I agree. I don't think we are. Yeah. I think ranking we're up, but we aren't close to the quality that is there. And we saw that at the Copa America. Like, we had moments, but ultimately we weren't able to get it done. And that's just the reality of it. But we talk about world-class and developing the game. We saw this summer a lot of Canadians getting moved, right? Derek Cornelius, Moise Bombito, Ligue 1, amongst other players. And again, if you guys are wondering for all that Canadian transfers, I recommend you, please, go to On the Rise's YouTube page, check him out. He is much more consistent than I am, and that is fine. But are there any transfers you saw this year in the summer window that you're more excited to see for Canadian players moving? I know there were big ones. We're still waiting for the cousins. I call Jonathan David and Alfonso Davies the cousins because that's where they are. The cousins haven't moved yet, but everyone else seemed to have gotten the move. Is there any move that you've seen from Canadian players that you're excited about in terms of the potential of growth that the players can have?
There's so many, right? Like you said, there's so many different moves that our players have made. Like, you can count them, and you wouldn't have thought that there would be this kind of a summer, but Copa America has just kind of opened the gates to that. And I think Jesse Marsh is another reason that's happened, just with his connections throughout Europe. But I'll lean outside of the Bombito one because that's the obvious shout for one of the most exciting ones. For me, it would probably be Theo Bair, because I think there's so much excitement that I've always had around Theo Bair. I thought once he moved to Scotland, I thought he had a great profile, right? He's a huge, built like a brick house striker, but it can score in multitude different ways. And it also can get in behind a back line with his speed. And a striker at that size who can run and also finish very well is just very unheard of in today's game. And him going to Auxerre is very interesting, right? Because they've just got promoted. They spent a decent amount of money, spent a good chunk of money on Theo Bair. So he's going to be starting week in, week out. And I think if he can start to get those consistent chances, and once he gets that first goal off his back, I think he's gonna have the floodgates open for him to a certain extent, right? Because Auxerre are only gonna score a certain amount of goals.
No, true.
So I think even if he hits maybe 7, 8 goals in all competitions, I think that's very good for a newly promoted side. Which, I mean, some Canadian fans might say 7 or 8 goals isn't great, right? Because you want to be hearing double digits and everything like that. Because we're so used to now David or what Laren did a couple of
Exactly.
seasons
I was going to
ago.
say that.
So I think you got to look at Theo Berry, such a young striker, made a huge move, but it's a great move. And it's a side that's already playing very exciting football after just getting promoted. And they've created chances. They've played good football. So I think once Theo Bear gets that first goal, I think that's the most exciting transfer for me. There's a few others like Jaden Nelson, I think is a great transfer as well. Like
Yes.
that's a rogue one, of course. Moving from Rosenborg on a loan to Ulm. And I know a lot of Toronto fans are probably maybe excited and disappointed. I don't know where Toronto fans are about that one. Maybe they want to see him home. Maybe they want to see him in Europe.
Look, as someone who follows the TFC on like a passive basis, look, once you leave TFC, that's when your career kicks off. So
yeah,
at this point, that's kind of how it's going. So keep going, Jaden. Just keep on moving. I like the Jaden Nelson shout because he's someone who I'm like, he feels like he's on the outside, but I don't know, like on a national team level, where do you put him? Do you put him as is he a winger? Is he more? Because he's played more at TFC before he moved. He was more of that roaming 8 role where he could kind of, it was in the middle, but then he can go out. So really more of a 10-ish profile, but really more of a outgoing winger. So I've always wondered like where he would fit in. I think he would fit in great in Marshball just because he gives the flexibility for the pressing and the movement. I like that. Theo Bear was my choice as well. So I'm gonna have to find a new name to give you for me. For me, I haven't given up on him yet, but like Theo Corbiano, right? They went down. He's still there. And like I want to see him get like consistent, even if it's off the bench, consistently getting like 30, getting 40, getting those minutes because the profile, 2 good feet, can play. Yes, it's a Spanish second division, but as a player like that, I would love to see him get some run over, say, a player. And this player has done well in his chances, but I would love to see like Theo get some run over, say, a Liam Miller. Give him a half. Give him a half to see what he can do. Because he's shown, yes, at the Gold Cup level, yes, in World Cup qualifiers. Yes, it was against the Cayman Islands. Yes, he scored. Yeah, I get it, but he's shown even the Mexico game in 2020 and 21. He had a few good chances in that Mexico game where he could have put the game away, but you like to see that. And I think giving a player like that the opportunity, yes, it's a bit more of a high-paced system now, but I think he could do well in terms of finding those spaces and really continue to develop. So for me, I'm curious with that. Then there's like the not the auxiliaries, but those who are further down, right? The Promise Davids gain a move. Okay, what will you do in that sense, right? The Daniel Jebison train. We haven't given up on him. He will come eventually. We don't know when that will be, but he will come eventually. Like, how does he look in his move now at where do you go? Watford? Yeah, he went down to Watford. On loan again. Like, how will he look? He seemingly does well when he goes on loans. And then his club calls him back just to sit on the bench, which is just very frustrating. But that's besides the point. But then again, those to me are some players. There are more that I'm very much curious to see what they're able to do. But those are my players. I'm like, I am curious to see what those few could do. Well, we saw a lot of movement. And every conversation, there's conversations with that. Like you look at the CPL, Kwesi Poku moving over to the Belgian second division is a big move for that league. But I think it's a type of move that it's not going to be that big always. But I think that's a move that the CPL can always afford because I think that's a type of player that if they can continue to develop them, you can get them out and that moves. And this is not necessarily a CPL conversation, but it's more so of who's next, right? Who are the next players who are moving out? Because I always felt as if based off the trials that this player got, like a James Cameron for Vancouver FC, right? I feel like that's a player who has had enough looks and is on the verge of moving. Even like a Jaquil Marshall-Rudy who moved from TFC to Montreal, probably just because Montreal will, I mean, if they sold Chuanyao the Grasshopper and this give this boy a good year, he will find himself in Europe, right? Those two are players I think like at that and they're at the right back slash fullback position who could really move in. Are there players that you see could be the next ones to make that move across, whether it's up to the MLS level or maybe it's across the pond to Europe, that you're kind of excited to see what their season holds as their seasons wrap up here?
I mean, you took out some very big and great names, of course, like James Cameron, everything like that. I think his teammate's a very interesting profile who got some trials in Tariq Tahid. I think he's a very
Mm,
interesting one, multiple trials, right? I could see him maybe even just going abroad, trying a league out over there, just
mm,
testing the water, right? It'd be just very interesting to see what he could do. I mean, I think the obvious shout after the friendlies, like someone we just talked about, Ali Ahmed.
mm.
Whitecaps have a really important MLS run coming up here, pulling into the playoffs. He could be a very pivotal piece for them, and I think maybe he could get a huge transfer to Europe. And Jaquil Marshall-Rutty, I think, is just the obvious one, right? Goes from Toronto, leaves his academy club, goes to Montreal. It just seems like the obvious fit for him to make that move abroad. If he can start games, get even just 2 or 3, 4 decent performances, Montreal will somehow find him a way to get abroad. Like
That
they
is true.
always do it, right? Even with
Mm,
Chouanier, like he didn't sign the contract. They're like, okay, we'll find you a club. Like, doesn't matter which club, we're gonna get you abroad. That's what you want, right? That's the
yeah.
one nice thing about Montreal, right? They'll find their Canadian players who want to move, and they'll help progress the program. It's a great thing. I think the two who I'd really key out for me, I don't know if they're going to be able to make that move, but I think I'm just very interested in their profile, would be Nathan Saliba and
Ooh,
DeAndre Kerr. I think Saliba
okay.
has a very interesting profile. I think he will be there in 2026. I think he'll be there
Hmm.
in September. I know 2026 is rogue, but September just makes a lot of sense because I think Marsh is going to really change it up a lot. He's hinted at Poku, and I think Saliba, of course, I think
Mm,
would be a great addition to that squad to continue him there, and especially against the Panama squad, which isn't as strong. Nothing against them
yeah.
as Mexico or US. I think it's a great opportunity for Saliba. He got some minutes this window when he wasn't even supposed to be with the team. So I think his profile could be very interesting. And I think when you look at our national team, we don't even have a number 10 right now. We're shoehorning Osorio there. Kone
Yes.
can play there. I think Saliba has that kind of profile, right? Because when you watch him, he's such a great dribbler. He's really good on the ball. I think his final third passing could improve a bit, but I
Okay.
think he just has that profile, right? So I don't know if
No,
those they're outside shouts for Europe, but I kind of want to switch up from what you said.
no, and that's fine. I mean, we're not going to steal each other's
Yeah, yeah,
answers, or I won't lose sleep if we do. But like you
yeah.
mentioned three things, I'm like, ooh, topic, topic, topic.
A lot.
Depth chart is a whole conversation with me because, I mean, Mo Farsi going to Algeria. Look, congratulations, Mo. Good
Yeah,
debut for Algeria. I'm happy for you. But I mean, the fullback position. Nico Seeger is playing fullback. He's a center back slash CDM, and he's playing fullback. We need fullbacks. We desperately. So
left
like I'm
backs.
looking at those two specifically, which is why I think ultimately when we would have the conversation over is Alfonso Davies a winger or a fullback? To me, based off of the depth of the program, you put him at fullback because I think
Yeah,
you can find more wingers there. And plus, from a recruiting standpoint, it's a lot easier to find wingers on a dual national standpoint, like aka like if you want to still want to chase Luca Koleosho, which I mean I do. I want to have all the good
yeah,
players.
of
So
course.
call me greedy. I want all the good players. But I think if you put him at fullback, it opens a door for that. You see, but you said Saliba, you see him more as a 10. Do
I
you
hope.
still you hope? Okay. Yeah, because I look at him more as like more of a
Me?
like a 6 to 8, like, and
Yeah,
that's how I see it. And I could be wrong with how he profiles out, but I always viewed him more in that range. So if you think he's a 10, that opens the door interestingly because we don't have tens. I mean, that
yeah,
was a that to me was like the undercurrent of all the dual nationals we were losing out to, like 21, 22. Like
yeah.
Flores was a 10, Stevan Mitrovic was a 10. And I'm just like, yeah, we're losing a bunch of them. So we got Kone. That's good. We just need one more, right? We don't know who that is, but we need one more to really kind of grow it out. And it worked out. But I think on the 10 level, outside of like a Saliba, which I think Saliba is going to be in this team. I think Sam Piet is a player who has done his service for this country well, but I think he's there to help Nico get ready. But I think once Nico shows to be competent at the CDM role, I think Sam gets phased out. And then your midfielders are basically Schwanyel, Seeger, Eustachio, and Kone. And then Saliba moves in kind of from there. How do you feel about a player, say, like Santiago Lopez, right, who played at the U20s, really probably profiles more as a very attacking winger, but you put him in a 10 role, I think he'd be creative enough to connect. Do you think he's a player that could be in the running for 26? Or do you think he's a player that you cap tie in between and then maybe 27 once he's getting more minutes at club, wherever that be, then you start to integrate him into the program? Like, how would you play around with Santi Lopez?
I would like to see him for 26. I mean, it really depends on the club form of some players in the next couple of years, right? Because Santiago
Yeah.
Lopez is already playing senior level at Liga MX, which is
Yeah.
a very good, respectable league, I think, still, even though there's the competition between that and the MLS. But I'd like to see Santiago Lopez, if he continues to rise until 2026, right? Because you
Mhm.
look at our forward options now, it's just ridiculous who we have up at 9, who our wingers are. Even like you're just talking on depth, when you look at left mid or right mid, and you talk about Corbinu or Nelson, you still got Liam Miller, you still got Alfonso Davies. You have so many players who can play on the wing now. It's ridiculous. And I think Santiago Lopez is a great player. And I think you also get that aspect of he's not so drilled right now. He's such a young player. You get it with Schaffelberg, like you
Mm.
talked about earlier. He's so direct. When in the modern game, you talk about so many styles in Europe, they're so drilled into them these days that it's pass, pass, follow the system, pass, pass, and then work to the goal until you have a clear shot. Like you said with Schaffelberg, he's so direct. That's one thing you get with Santiago Lopez. Scores so many different types of goals. He's so exciting, so direct. I think that's just something
Mm.
to have different to your arsenal, right? Someone late in the game, you don't have a clue what he's going to do, right? And that's just
Exactly.
something Schaffelberg does. And I think he'd be great to have in 2026. It's such a, and it's also like something to look at Mexico, and they're fighting with us for players now, and they are worried we're going to get one of their better prospects. It's just how times have changed, really.
Honestly, it is changed and it's great. I love it. It gives me more because Canadian football is giving me joy. Ghana football is humbling me. It is
Yeah.
humbling me hard. So thank you, Canada, for giving me this joy. Because if not, it'd be hard. But like I like that aspect in terms of just the directness of the players and where they are. I view again, Santi would be a good shout for that because I started doing a series on just like depth chart for players and where it is. I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
you are in 9. And I almost want to track back to like Kwesi Poku in that sense. Like, what do you see him profiling as? Is he a 9? Is he a midfielder, left or right? Is he a fullback? At this point, like I'm at this point, I'm just gonna low key call him Janine Becky because they'll just play him everywhere and he'll be fine. Like, you want to play
Yeah.
center back? Cool, go do it. We
Try it
love
out.
you.
Yeah.
But like,
Anywhere,
but I
really, right?
think like for him, where do you see a player like this? Because I think if you're looking at in the now, I think let him play where he's best suited. In a projecting future role, I see him as that Richie Larea type replacement, where it's like you can kind of play him in the fullback. If you need to play him further up the pitch, you can type of a role. I think he has a bit more upside than him, but I think that's where I could see him if you were going like for like profile for the national team for him. For a player like Kwesi Poku, what do you think his best role is based off his time at Forge and now for where he is now?
I think it's ridiculous how he went from playing as a fullback to transitioning to play a 9 and not looking out of position. Like, he was immediately one of the best number 9s in the league. He started scoring goals at a rapid pace, and you're like,
Mhm.
okay, he's going to slow down eventually, right? He's a young forward. He has the pace, and just no, he didn't slow down at all. Nothing changed. He was the best number 9 all year long. Probably might even end up as the best player in the CPL, and he's only there for so long, right?
Mm.
And for me, I think he looks like he could be a 9, but he could also be, like you said, like a Davies or Richie Larea, where he can just play anywhere. Like, you could play him on the right, left back, or you could play him right back, left mid. Like there's so many options for Kwasi Poku, and when,
Mhm.
like you say, you look at our depth, which years ago you'd never be able to even look at depth. You'd be looking at free agents, and and now you look at our striker depth. There's Bear, Laren, David, Promise David, Kerr, even if you want to throw him in there, Jason
Mhm.
Russell Road. The list goes on, right? So
Yep.
Poku has so many different routes into this team, whether it's at winger, fullback, striker. That's a brilliant thing for himself that he can get into this team. But I think he more so looks like a 9 just by his body frame and how quickly he's taken to playing at that position. I would I would more so lean to a number 9 position for Kwasi Poku.
And that's fair. Like I think again, if you look at it from where he's excelling, I want to see more of him as a 9. I think if you look at him in the team as it's built now, I think his easiest pathway onto the team is as a fullback because
100%.
Sam Adekugbe, I mean the man. I love Sam, I do, but like until he's a player where I would honestly say give him the year off. Just don't call him in. Give him a year off. Get healthy. Get your mental straight. Get that settled, and then come back in 20 like at the end of 2025 and see how you're feeling. I would do that for Sam. And then in that case, you can rotate more fullbacks, give him a run. If you see Luke DeFugerola as more of a center back or a fullback, play them here, give him some games to do so. Put him there. I think that's an easier pathway because again, now you have another player who could be effectively like a Davies in terms of he won't mind getting up into the pitch from that far deep. Or if you need an extra attacker, you can play him out in a left midfield, right midfield role, but he's not afraid to drift into the middle and become more of that poaching or just attacking the ball 9. I think that would be probably so ultimately ends up in the middle. I think
Yeah.
that left midfield, but really playing as an inverted midfielder or inverted forward moving forward. I think that would be his best bet to get to this team. But again, the 9s, like remember when we like, and again, nothing against the player. Remember when Lucas Cavallini was like our 9 of choice? Remember those days?
Oh,
We
I was
we
going
were
to say
younger
Teshua
then.
Akindele.
Tesho. We're not gonna do a thing where you go into players we haven't named in a while, okay? Because
Yeah.
it ends for me at a very specific. I can name more women players than I can men players. That's just the reality. After this,
Yeah.
Rosario and De Guzman, I'm like, Charmaine Hooper,
Yeah.
and yeah, Kara Lang. I got those, but like I think that's my thing. So, but I think like as a 9, he has because you mentioned all the 9s we have. We didn't even talk about like an Ike Ugbo who,
Yeah. We had
for my
Jefferson.
money, Jebison as well. If Ugbo and Jebison walk into the team in good form, and for me, they are strikers 3 and 4.
Yeah.
And that's how I rate them. I'm very high on those two based off the leagues they'd be playing there. And so like I don't want Poku to walk in and be like, yeah, I'm gonna be a 9 here. Oh, by the way, here's Tanny, here's Steven Afrifa, who we're gonna play out wide, but is technically can be a 9 as well. But and Theo Bear is playing well too, by the way.
Yeah.
Promise David is a thing. Here we go. And it's like, no, just let the 9 sort themselves out. Play him more so in that role. And I think that would suit him best. I think for that. And so for me, Questy, that would a role for him. Also, I'm biased because that's my name. So like any player who's has my name, I will support him. I will
I don't blame
support
you.
him till the death. It works. I love that. And kind of moving this back to like the CPL a bit, right? CPL season is running down. We are here, almost done. And again, they've had their movements and such. I'm almost curious as a general conversation point. Like, what do you see that they've done well this year? And what do you think is that next piece for them to really take their next step in terms of growth? Because I think from the casual soccer fan, we know it exists, right?
Yeah.
We see the Kwesi Poku move, but we've seen other moves as well. I think some things that have worked well and not well is that they've had players going out. I don't think it's always great when players come back in within a year or two. That's a bit of a difficult thing. Like I love William Accio, but like moving back to the CPL was like, hey, good for you, but I wish you would have stayed. It would have done. But you still have your Victor Latoris who've moved, your Urban Pebbles who've moved, right? Your Didier Nabzis who've moved. Like those players are there, and it's not necessarily about movement, but for you in terms of the CPL following for where it is, How have you do you follow it much? And in terms like what are steps you think would work in terms of helping grow the game where it is there?
Well, being from a province that doesn't have a team, which makes it a bit unfortunate to follow a team, I've
I
been become a Cavalry supporter, only team I've been able to watch. But
mm,
I think they've done very well. I just the play every year, I think generally has just gotten better and better and better. Like last year compared to this year, I think it's just levels have completely gone
mm,
up. I don't know if it's generally just better teams, better management in general. I mean, you can see it with York, of course. New manager comes
yeah,
in, look completely different. Like they were a club on the brink of banishing, right? Like not even
they
existing.
really
And
were.
now look how good they look, right? That's simply just owners, management hitting every nail on the head. And I think so many other clubs can take examples from that. But you just look at the league across, it just looks more competitive all across the board, right? Like everyone thought Atletico Ottawa were just gonna blitz the
Run
league. It
away with it.
wasn't gonna be
Yeah.
it wasn't gonna be competition. I did myself. And there's multiple sides who are competing for first, competing to even be in the playoffs. And it's just fun to watch this year, right? Like last year, it was kind of like my first year getting fully into the CPL and watching it completely from last year to this year. I can just see a difference in pace, difference in skill. I know it's not completely different sides, completely different players, but you
Mhm.
can just see the level is slowly improving, right? With a newer league going through COVID, there's always going to be those growing pains. And I think they've done a great job just improving year on year. I think one thing, I mean, it's just a small thing they could improve is maybe marketing. I know that's tough.
Mm,
In Canada, you had so many other different sports battling it, but with so many people coming to our country, with so many football supporters coming to our country, it doesn't get talked about enough. And I think if it got headlined a bit more, like even like you say for Cavalry, point out Dominic Sator was a former
yeah.
player, point out Laturi, go around the league. You look at so many like even McNaughton. You just point out have like different jersey days or something like that to even focus on those bigger players, so
Mhm.
that younger kids are saying like, oh, he came from here. He's playing with Nashville. He used to play with TFC. He's in Europe. Like I think it's just little things that they can improve because I think the play is just, of course, going to keep jumping up. But I think
Mm,
marketing, just getting people to have eyes on the league, especially for me, like a province that doesn't even have a team, I don't think there's like enough players or enough supporters getting eyes on the league when they're not even a club in that province. So there's just little things.
No, and all good points. Honestly, all good points. The marketing and the growth of it. I'm lazy when it comes to marketing, so I'm like, if it's not past the if it's over the Burlington Bridge, I'm not going. I'm not driving in traffic. That's just my personal opinion. But I think the growth and the connection is the thing I feel that they could really go with. Like there are so many infrastructure conversations I could have in terms of like we don't have soccer specific stadiums. We know that
Yeah.
like we can't. We are aware of this. But I think there's so many conversations in terms of the growth. I think the marketing and connecting with the local community is the thing that they have to do well and to really grow it. And that's just from a butts and seeds standpoint. I think from a growth of the game and the product overall, I think game day experience, all those things can improve. But I think for the player, I think we as a country take the next step when a young player will look at, and you see this a little bit in the States where like you have like you're going to go pro. Do you go MLS Academy or do you leave that and go USL? Because maybe there's less barriers of leaving. You can play, maybe if you want to get a move to Europe. It may not be the flashiest move, but it gives you at least some space and it's not as cumbered by other things. I think if a young player, and we were starting to see a bit of that trend, like Kwesi Poku was at TFC Academy, left there, went to Forge, grew. I think the more you start to see younger players saying, "Hey, I can either join this academy, or maybe I go to a York United, and I say I start my career there. I get minutes and I start playing. Maybe it's like, hey, instead of that, we go to Pacific, right? And you see that with the James Camerons, the Tariq, TJ Tahids, right? You see those players doing that. York has a couple kids like that as well.
Yeah.
Their names are just because ADHD. They're gone. But like
Yeah.
I think the more you have those types of opportunities, it grows. And it really does help. I think ultimately, yes, more teams will help. More teams equals money. We don't have the infrastructure. For the life of me, it would be nice in a perfect world where I say there's a team in every province, because then at least you have something before it turns like weirdly territorial like the MLS has for rights and fees. We don't need all that
It's
conversation, but like at least have something that they can at least turn and say, hey, we can be part of this. And the other low key thing I would say is because of something like Leagues Cups that the MLS does, the CPL really could take advantage and be like, hey guys, I know those are happening, but if you just want to watch games that actually count for something and aren't like a made up tournament in the middle of the season, come check us out. Right? Summer, come out to see it, get involved with the clubs, especially the local clubs, the house league clubs, get them out there so they know that it's a viable option. And then you do that eventually. Maybe it's not the team next time. Maybe it's mom, dad, and the kids next time. Maybe it's something, and then you grow from there. But I think there are so many pathways for it. But again, for a league that had to start year 1, 2, navigate through a pandemic for another year, come through, deal with its media sponsors and whatnot, and kind of reach the level where they are, it's commendable for them. And if they play it well, they can be in a spot where they can really grow, but they just have to take advantage of the opportunities. I always make this point with, say, like women's sports. Women's sports has grown not just because there are people who want to watch women's sports, but they've taken advantage of the inefficiencies of men's sports, which is I don't want to wait until 9 p.m. Eastern time to watch this game on a Tuesday when what's this? Caitlin Clark is playing on Sunday at 3. What? Perfect.
I'm not sleeping.
It's like seeing a movie in the middle of the day. Like I have other things I can do. It's lovely. I love it. And I think if the CPL takes that approach, especially with like the gaps left by, say, the MLS, but also summer sports overall, I think they could really take advantage of it, take advantage of those inefficiencies, and kind of move from there. So I think on a local level, and then you have things like League One Ontario, which I missed that. The championship level was tonight. I was like, I was going to go for that. Like, doing a podcast tonight. Can't go see that, but I'll see the results. Good luck, St. Catherine's Roma. I believe in you. But like, I think that comes down to if they take advantage of that, they can definitely grow and kind of go from there. So I love that from aspects, and I'm excited for that. For you, we've seen what it is. We'll kind of wrap it up here because people are popping in now, and that's cool. This wasn't supposed to be live, but we're here. It's all good. It's all good. For you, let's go back to the national team level. We're going into that October window. There's the Panama game. Probably nothing else unless they play like CF Montreal, which I wouldn't be opposed to. Is there a expectation / is there a player you'd love to see, maybe who hasn't been called up by Jesse Marsch yet in that October window?
That's a very interesting one, right? Because Jesse is keyed out talks with Santiago Lopez, which we've talked about. He's keyed out with Kwasi Poku. I think he's talked about him coming in October, and also he's kind of hinted at Daniel Jebison, how he's noticed him or whatever he said. Kind of really,
he's aware. He's aware of him.
Yeah, that's what it was. He's aware.
We watch your socials, not your Instagram lives, but we watch your socials.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're there.
Yeah, like those three, I think, are the ones that really keep your eye on, right? I think he's going to heavily with the depth of this team. Like we've been talking about the depth of Canada throughout the episode, that it's so important. I think we're going to really see it against Panama. So I think leaning towards who would be the call-up I'd look towards, I'll say cautious and say I want to see Santiago Lopez there and get minutes, but I'll be hopeful and say Daniel Jebison as well. Keep my fingers crossed, right? We got to be optimistic.
I agree with that. I think that's fair to be that optimistic. I mean, my wish list, I was joking with one of my podcast hosts. I'm like, if Jesse Marsch gets our entire transfer window wish list in one window, I don't know how I'm going to feel about that, but I'll have words. I will have words. But I mean, we got Nico Seeger. That's great. If we got Jebison, and let me dream, okay? Give me Jebison, give me Koleosho, okay? And then give me another CDM, and I'll be happy. I don't know who it is. Actually, no, I'm gonna be straight up greedy. Give me those two and Santi, And then for my personal game, give me Jaden Nelson and Theo. I don't care how many players they call up for this window. Call up 40. Call
Yeah,
them
exactly.
all.
Have that big
Just
camp we're
have
talking about.
Actually, that's the idea. Let's just
Yeah.
have a camp where the first game is a scrimmage.
Yeah.
Just do it.
Exactly.
Charge me $5 to go see it, and I will do it. I will. Mark, Kevin, my boy Blue, do you hear me? A 40 player camp and a scrimmage. I'm telling you guys, you can't go wrong. You cannot go wrong with this idea. We come up with the ideas. But yeah, I think those would be my players. I would love to see that. And I think ultimately those players would be deserving. But again, minutes, playing time, form, all those things matter when it comes to getting national team calls and movements from that. So I think that's what I would be looking for. Before we sign off, is there anything that you are working on that the folks who may be interested in, Canadian transfer, Canadian football overall, just so that they can know to jump over, or just whatever the news is, I'll be covering it?
Just everything, like you said. I'm trying to keep up with my finger on the pulse as much as I can. Got slow Wi-Fi, but I'm trying to produce videos as quickly as I possibly can with my work schedule. But any possible news, I'll try and be on it as quick as possible. Let's building this community the best we can here.
No, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. No, but yeah, so make sure you guys go if you haven't already. On the Rise is a YouTube channel, covers all things Canada soccer, make one of the better ones out there as well, on top of the ones that you guys already know. As for me, guys, you know where you'll find me. We were going to do our Thursday video, but it's going to be on Friday because I have to go through therapy for all things Ghana football because it's just painful because we don't have good pitches. Apparently, we can't beat teams. We draw teams, but we've known that for a while. So I will live with that, and we'll kind of go from there. So with that being in note, guys, thank you so much for stopping by. I do appreciate it. If you're on the rewatch, let us know in terms of what you've thought about the friendly games, any Canadian players, any questions you have, make sure you drop them in there. We'll do our best to answer them. And again, guys, thank you again for Lane for being here. I do appreciate you taking some time out there. I really do appreciate that. And since this is officially a video, I didn't realize this was the video, we're going to end the video properly with the outro, and we'll just kind of go from there. But guys, thank you again. And until next time, we'll just say bye-bye for now.